Hello, hello. It is the one and only 5D Transformations, and I'm back. And in this video, I wanted to talk to you all, specifically people who have negative visions or negative thoughts that, imagining bad situations happening and they can't control it. I've worked with different people who had that situation going on, and they're like, what does this mean? Does this mean that since I'm thinking this is going to happen, that something bad is about to happen? What can I do about it? You know what I mean? I'm having negative ideas, thoughts, people who have thoughts of, you know, people getting injured or, bad circumstances happening to them, or they have visions of worst case scenarios and things like that. And just, in that kind of situation, here's what you got to understand, when you see the worst possible scenario, it's really just the polarity to the best case scenario. So let's say if you're imagining you're afraid, your biggest fear is falling off a building. Well, the best case scenario would be that you'd be perfectly safe, um, either in that building or you don't even have to go up there. Like there's a best case scenario that you don't even have to worry about anything because it's super fortified and you don't got to worry about falling. Um, and or you might have a bad outcome that something bad is going to happen when really, but you got to think, what if the best case scenario happened, right? That would be the polarity to that negative thought. Now the reality is that reality exists in the middle. You know what I mean? Until you take a polarizing action, whether that's a positive polarizing action, like let's say you want to lose weight and you start really working out a lot, you know what I mean? Or if you take a super negative action, like let's say you're afraid of, you know, getting sick. And let's say, all right, well, if you're smoking and drinking and living negative and you're doing it in excess to the point where you're doing it so extreme, that's when negative things happen. But if you do everything within a pretty balanced level and you don't break that spear, then you if you're not taking the negative actions, right? Like you might have a worst case scenario of heights. So, you know, unless you're putting yourself in the top of a building with no rails to protect you, because that's what's going to have to happen in order to actualize that situation. You're going to have to put yourself on a rooftop, put yourself in a space where you can fall off of it. You know what I mean? In order for that to play out, people who are afraid of flying, for example, like the best case scenario is the flight goes perfect. The worst case scenario is the flight goes awful. The truth is usually in the middle. It's going to be a good flight, but it might be a little turbulence. You know what I mean? So don't worry about that you might think about it or have these visions. They're just showing you the worst case scenario. And generally, your subconscious is doing that to keep you alert so that you don't do that. Now, of course, you don't want to be stuck with negative visions, negative thinking. So the way to reverse this and start having more positive visions is number one, you got to forgive yourself. You got to tell yourself, talk to your mind and say, look, mind, I really don't like when you put these negative visions out. I appreciate it if you would stop. And you'd be surprised. People don't understand. You got to talk to your mind. Your mind is your tool. You have to use your mind. Don't let your mind use you. You're the one that controls it. The mind is like a dog. You have to train it like a dog in order to have it disciplined to respect you. If you do not train the mind, what will happen is it will act like a dog and do whatever it wants. It'll have its own thoughts. It'll have its own negative visions, and you'll be a victim to your own mind. When really it's meant to be your servant and your biggest protector. So, with that being said, the key thing is to understand it's okay to have those negative visions as long as you don't take any super polarizing actions. So the worst case scenario with negative visions is if you actually believe them. The key for you is to understand that they have nothing to do with you. They're just projecting different scenarios, but you of yourself don't have to follow any of those visions. I mean, come on. And that's beautiful though, because then you can imagine anything. You want your mind to be flexible. You want to imagine all kind of different scenarios and you remain neutral and you just observe the thoughts instead of yourself being controlled by the thoughts or affected by the thoughts. And that really, you could exercise that to do a meditation, doing mindful meditation, certain exercises where you just practice deep breathing. There's a lot of different things you can do to calm the body, calm the mind, and visualize positive situations of what you want to happen, or just enjoy the stillness of no thoughts. And that's something we could always talk about later. There's a lot of people who specialize in meditation and being able to quiet the mind. I think that's a very important skill set because it completely relates to what we're talking about. So just want you to understand, those thoughts don't mean anything. It's polarity. You can imagine the best case scenario of you hitting the jackpot. You can imagine the worst case scenario of you being on the street poor. The truth is usually in the middle. You know what I mean? You're probably, in the middle somewhere. Now, don't get me wrong. You might be moving closer to one polarity at times. But the key thing is, as long as you do not take polarizing extreme actions to actualize that extreme situation, it will not come to fruition, and it will just be a polarity for you to see. Or for you to think about. So with that being said, man, I appreciate you all for listening. Make sure to tap in. Make sure to like, subscribe. We got the Patreon going on with the Patreon coaching course that I have. It's live videos every week. That's going to be kicking in this week. So I look forward to y'all tapping in. And aside from that, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.